Alrighty, video number 3, training on the swing plane. This is where especially a lot of recreational golfers, older golfers can get into trouble with maintaining that swing plane, the ability to hold the angle of attack without coming up or going down. If you're coming up, you're going to be sculling it. If you're dropping down, you're going to be chunking it. So all of the drills that you're going to be doing are going to be helping you maintain as tight of a swing plane as possible. I'll tell you straight off the bat, if you want any hopes of developing consistency in your swing plane, what I'm about to tell you, if you just take that and shut the video off, it would be worth your time. Okay, this is how important this is. If you have any hope of maintaining consistency in your swing plane, you have to address your hamstrings. End of story. Swing plane equals hamstrings. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I've done enough assessments. I've done enough swing plane analysis. I've done enough cases to know that if your hamstrings are imbalanced, weak, and non-functional, your ability to maintain a swing plane and have a quality, consistent swing plane will be compromised. People do it, but it's going to be at a cost. It's going to be at the cost of compensation, which lowers your ability to maintain consistency. So again, think of the overarching goal of what we're doing here is we're trying to eliminate as many compensation patterns. We want to eliminate the body's need for compensation, and that clears the runway for playing your best golf. So step 1, you got to get those hamstrings as compliant as possible. Hamstrings, remember, they are a 2-joint muscle, meaning that they affect the hip and the knee. So they have to be responsive at both. Tight hamstrings are typically weak hamstrings. So there's a lot going on there. But it all starts with the address position. I can tell before someone even moves into their swing how compromised they are, just by looking at how their body behaves at setup. The hamstring will affect everything above it and below it. If you don't have control of your hamstrings, it's going to be very difficult to maximize your shoulder turn, because the hamstring affects the pelvis affects the spine, and your ability to maintain your T-spine is going to be affected by your ability to maintain the proper positioning in your pelvis. And if you can't maintain the proper position in your T-spine, that means your head automatically has to compensate, and we know that the head always wins. So then we have problems. So now you can start to see how everything is connected. Everything affects the other, but they have to be addressed in the right order. Okay, that's number 1. Once they're addressed in the right order, then you can start to determine how much time you need to spend on any given area to clear out the obstacle. Some obstacles are going to clear a little bit faster. Sometimes you're going to take a little bit more time. Typically, this is where most golfers pitch a tent to get this area sorted out, because the hamstrings again affects everything that I've just mentioned, and they can be a little bit stubborn, but with the right training and consistency, we can get over it. These drills will start to help you do that. That's why the release technique, specifically the way I instructed in the videos, will help speed up that process. Okay, so that's why the first drill in the sequence is the good morning stretch, or what we call the hip fold, which is stretching out the hamstrings. Pretty self-explanatory. Again, if you're looking at the manual and you're looking at my picture, I'm a little bit more flexible. So again, I'm close to 90. I'm at close to a 90-degree hip fold here, but you only need to get anywhere between a 45 max 60 degrees hip fold in terms of golf positioning. So don't beat yourself up if you don't look exactly like me. The key is the positioning of the body. Creasing at the hip, maintaining T-spine, maintaining proper pelvic alignment. You can see here, the one that's outlined in the red, I'm exaggerating it, but all I would need to do is grab a golf club and address it. And that could possibly be the posture of many people with severely tight hamstrings. So you don't want to look like that at address. If you look like that at address, we're going to have some challenges. But don't worry, again, if you're following the instructions, you'll work yourself out of this 1 degree at a time. It's just about consistency. Just think of it like brushing your teeth, but for your body. Consistency. You're not going to get dental health with one brush. You got to do it consistently. You got to touch it. You got to maintain it. And then you can build on it and get better. So the good morning stretch particularly isolates the hamstrings at the hip. You do get some effect at the knee, depending on how much or how little you bend your knee. So there are nuances there. But start with your knees slightly bent, and or bend your knees enough to where you can assume as perfect of a hip crease as possible. So this is where the nuances are going to come in at. Okay, so play with it, but let positioning be your guide rather than trying to get to the floor and overstretch and be a contortionist. This stretch in particular, it's not about how far you go down. It's about positioning first. So position first. It's not shown here, but you can even rest your hands on the back of a chair or on the edge of a counter to unload your upper body, so that way you can focus on positioning all by itself. Sometimes the limiting factor in learning the drill could be strength. So to eliminate that entirely, you can put a club on the ground, get behind a chair, into your golf cart, just to unload and just focus on positioning. So you can do it hanging on to something or freehand the way I'm doing it here. So the key is positioning. Then as we move on we add in a rotational component to the swing plane and the hip fold. This is what the cigarette butt stretch does. It's combining the hip fold with a rotation of the hip joint. In this case, we're isolating one hip at a time. So that's why the particulars in the foot positioning is important. So we're isolating one hip, and then we're isolating the other hip. On the backswing, we're driving through one hip. On the downswing, we're driving through one hip and over to the other. So it's important that both hips be responsive, especially as they rotate. Remember, your hip is a ball and socket joint. This is my impression of a ball and socket joint. Here's your socket. The ball fits in there. So it's important that that hip joint and that thigh bone can do what it needs to and rotate individually, right? And then that has to coordinate with the other one, and then that has to coordinate with your spine and everything else. So this is the intricacy, and these are all the things that your brain and your musculoskeletal system have to process in this whole process, in the whole golf swing sequence. But again, I'm helping you extract more meaning and benefit in what you're doing. And again, when it's all said and done, this whole routine is going to take you 10, 20 minutes. I can do this whole sequence probably in 10 minutes if I'm touching it, maybe even 5. If I'm going touch, 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 touch. Even if you did that, trust me, it's going to make a huge difference. So take your time with it and just, again, follow the instructions. We're good to go. So that's why the cigarette butt stretch is here. So now when we move on to the windmill stretch, we're now adding a more integrative component to the original hip crease. So now we have a hip fold, we have a hip rotation, and now we're adding the spine rotation component. So we're literally reverse engineering everything that the body has to do in a golf swing, and we're teaching the body one step at a time how to move. to be golf swing compliant. So that's why the windmill stretch is where it is. So again, we have the hip rotation, hip fold, and then spine rotation. Again, follow the instructions on the videos to get all the details. I'm just fine tuning it. I'm adding nuggets. I'm tightening the screws on the whole machine that we call the triple threat golf swing. That's what we're doing here, all right? So look at that, and we're good to go there. So that's it for that. So we're focusing on that. And so the next video, we will again go down to the hip coil, where we will get into those nuances of those drills. So we'll see you there.